Welcome to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. My name is Jamal Thomas. This is indeed my show. I am glad that you guys can be with me today. We are in Donald Trump's second inauguration. For whatever that means, I'm not quite sure what that means yet. And I would imagine that the American public don't necessarily know what that means. I am trying to, at the very least, not, well, let's say, take somewhat of an optimistic view of this. Donald Trump got into office. He immediately went to executive orders. And after doing one executive order after the next, some of those things were pardons. He effectively pardoned the people for January 6th. Still going with this idea that he won the election. He even pardoned some people who apparently attacked and beat up cops, putting cops into the emergency room. That was another one of the group that he pardoned. And of course, he's still getting his people confirmed into Congress. Tulsi Gabbard, there's apparently a full court press in order to prevent Tulsi Gabbard from getting in as Director of National Intelligence. So there is that. One of the other interesting things that has taken place is this full court press on the West Bank. Now, I asked the question whether or not what Donald Trump traded to Netanyahu was effectively control and destruction of the West Bank. Now, I forgot who I had on the show who said, well, no, West Bank is too big for Donald Trump to be able to do that. But is that what's happening? I mean, Israel has gone on a murder spree over the West Bank. And so I'm trying to get someone on to talk about that. Today's show is going to be short because yesterday, my entire day was spent sitting in the train station, which made it difficult to effectively book guests. And every guest that I sent the invite to effectively said no, or that they themselves were doing something. I have a beginning of the show tomorrow. And so hopefully we can get the full show for tomorrow, but I also have to do stuff associated with residents. This place is only temporary. And I'm trying to find an apartment in Richmond itself. I have I guess a tour, if you want to call it that, of one of the places today that I need to go to in order to review. So I do have an interview this morning with Carl Jha. There was a conversation that took place between Xi Jinping and Putin yesterday. There was this kind of video call. Apparently that call lasted for a very long time. And I would imagine they had a lot to talk about in regards to the U.S. Trump taking power and what that would mean for both governments. Both did say that they were open to negotiations. Both did say that they want to, I guess, find some way to live in this kind of Donald Trump world that is now there. I would imagine that both of them, at the very least, are open to some sort of negotiation. I would imagine that. Providing that Donald Trump is open to those negotiations. Also, what was interesting yesterday, right here, this was Trump when asked about Gaza. Now, keep in mind, Donald Trump came up with a peace deal for Gaza, so at the very least, he's getting credit for a ceasefire. But listen to what he says here when asked about Gaza, meaning that any person who's making this argument that Donald Trump is really going to attend to the ceasefire, that he's going to push and cajole Israel into the ceasefire. Listen to what he says, because I don't think that is effectively what's going to happen with this, even though I could be wrong.
But some FedCom.
That are you, Mr. President, that you can keep the ceasefire in Gaza and conclude the three phases of this deal?
I'm not confident. That's not our war, it's their war, but I'm not confident. But I think they're very weakened on the other side.
Do you support the two-state?
Gaza, boy, I looked at a picture of Gaza. Gaza is like a massive demolition site. That place it's really got to be rebuilt in a different way.
Do you plan to help rebuilding Gaza?
I might. You know, Gaza is interesting. It's a phenomenal location. On the sea, best weather. You know, everything's good. It's like some beautiful things could be done with it, but it's very interesting. But some fantastic things could be done with Gaza.
How do you see the future in governance for Gaza?
Well, it depends. I can't imagine you could have, well, you certainly can't have the people that were there. Most of them are dead.
Confident are you, Mr. President, that you can keep
Beautiful property. Most of the people that were there were dead. No, I don't believe the ceasefire is going to last. And again, this is a U.S. president, and this is after the United States invested 70 to 80% of the resources necessary to turn Gaza into that demolition site, as Donald Trump called it. I guess my concern with that statement is that it would take U.S. pressure to keep Israel in line. In the same way that Donald Trump sent over his spokesperson in order to effectively get that ceasefire, there's a question of whether or not he's going to do anything to maintain that ceasefire. Based on that answer, I am not the most confident. Also, Columbia University is back into play, and immediately, this happens. Protests go back into effect almost immediately. Now, for all of this talk about ceasefires, or not ceasefires, I'm sorry, for all of this talk about First Amendment, believing in free speech, all of that talk that was coming out of conservatives and Republicans, are they going to stick to it? Meaning, is there going to be this kind of radical hypocrisy where they go after students protesting what is happening? Or is it going to be, well, these people, these students have a right to protest. We have a First Amendment in this country. And so they have every right to get across their grievances at the U.S. government. Will it be that? Or will it be, this is anti-Semitic by definition, any association with the Palestinians in and of itself, it's some kind of anti-Semitic trope? How and what is it going to be? I strongly suspect it's going to be any attack on Israel, meaning vocal attack, is indicative of anti-Semitism. I strongly suspect it's going to be that. We'll see. I mean, the rub is the previous government also called it anti-Semitism, also went after those students. We will see what the Trump administration does. As I said, I'm trying to keep somewhat of an open mind in regards to this government. No, I do not have the feelings about this government. No, I do not have the feelings about Trump. Yes, I think it's going to be a dumpster fire. I think a $36 trillion deficit is going to balloon even higher. There's going to be all sorts of crackdowns on the issue of immigration. But as I pointed out to you, I had no expectations of either. And if at the very least, Donald Trump is willing, is open to ending these wars, at the very least, there would be that. So we'll see. I am not the most hopeful. I went to an event over the course of the inauguration. I went to DC day before yesterday. And we had all sorts of speakers who was working with this idea of whether or not, how can I say it? Because I think Caleb Maupin gave the best speech. And his speech effectively boiled down to listing all of these aspects of American history that are often forgotten. And his point was that I don't want to give up these good parts of America in lieu of the way America acts now. Basically, all of these negative aspects of us setting fires around the globe, getting people killed, all of that stuff is true, but all of that stuff is not singular. It's not that those are the only parts of America. There are good parts. There are good people who were pushing for this notion of either liberation, of change, so forth. And those people on some level were successful. I mean, after all, we're not a slave economy right now. Black folks are not treated in the same way they were in the 60s. So those movements, those lefty movements did and were successful to some degree of pushing the country in a better direction, despite the fact that we are still in the situation of helter skelter, might makes right. And yeah, we're perfectly okay with gutting any ally that we have for our own betterment and our own expense. But I do think Caleb has a really good point. Those are not things that we should toss to the side in lieu of all of the negative aspects of the way this country operates. It was a good event. There were really good speakers at that event. It was in DC, and at some point, we're going to get the video from Caleb where I would put that video up. We tried to get the video up, and there were technical issues associated with getting the video live or live stream on various channels. But I do think Caleb is right that there were and there are aspects, or let's say people, who work very hard in order to push this country in a better direction. And we can't ignore that aspect. And I guess the reason, I think Caleb's main point is that we shouldn't fall into cynicism. We shouldn't fall into this position that nothing can change, everything is going to be horrible, the world is going to careen into a third world war. All of those things may be true, but we shouldn't necessarily just go in that direction and assume that that's going to be the case, considering we've had other epochs in this country. And I know epoch is not the right word for it, but I'll use it. That was different. That was different. So there is that. Before I close the show today, I'm going to bring in my guests, but just to preempt, I want to talk a little bit about Joe Biden and Joe Biden's legacy, at the very least, what I think their legacy is going to be, because I don't necessarily think it's going to be the most favorable for one Joe Biden. But I want to bring in my guests. We are joined with the man of the hour, Carl Ja. He is host of Silk and Steel podcast focused on China and surrounding regions and their history, culture, and politics. Carl, what is going on, my man? How you doing this morning? Happy New Year.
I think I've spoken. Jamar, thank you. Happy New Year.
I've had you on before, after the New Year, right?
I think you did, but you know what? Chinese New Year is coming, so you can wish me Happy New Year again.
Fair enough. I'll say it again. How you doing, man? You doing okay?
I'm doing good. How are you, Jamar?
I am doing all right. We are in a new presidency. It is official. Donald Trump is King of America. What is your thoughts on that? I mean, what is your expectation, especially in relation to China? To give Donald Trump credit, and I don't know how long this credit is going to last, but when he invited Xi Jinping to the inauguration, it seemed heartfelt. It seemed honest. Like, it didn't necessarily seem like a power play. It seemed like he legitimately was open to Xi Jinping coming to the inauguration. Give me your thoughts. What is your thinking so far in regards to what Trump is going to do this term in relation to China?
You know, Trump surprised me. I have to admit, Trump surprised me. I mean, number one is a ceasefire deal in Palestine. This Trump, with that act, and also Trump called Xi Jinping. He said they had an excellent conversation. They talk about area of cooperation. They talk about how they're going to solve the problems in the relationship. So these two things already mark Trump above Biden. This makes Biden the worst president in the recent history, in the recent memory. You know, he's worse than he's up there. Joe Biden is up there with George W. Bush, who, by the way, the DNC has rehabilitated because they hate Trump. And Trump just showed that, you know what? I'm actually not as bad as those guys. And and there's, that's something. That's something. But the real thing we need to watch out for is what are what about the people that Trump surround him with in the cabinet?
Right.
Because we have some noted China hawks like Marco Rubio, and and uh, uh, so we're gonna have to see whether this Trump presidency will be a replay of Trump 1.0, when basically he led some of the people in his cabinet sabotaging him, like how John Bolton kind of sabotaged his rapprochement with North Korea, with Kim Jong Un. So I, I I don't think Trump had bad experiences with Xi Jinping. He actually traveled to China, unlike Joe Biden. Joe Biden has never traveled to China during his term as president.
Yeah.
Despite him talking about him walking with Deng Xiaoping in the Himalayas, which never happened, and Joe Biden actually knows Xi Jinping when Joe Biden was the vice president. Yet he never even visited China. He didn't want anything to do with China. He doubled down on Trump's sanction on China. So Trump have leverage right now to negotiate. This shows in how he handles the whole TikTok fiasco.
Right.
Biden is the one who signed the law of when the Congress passed the ban. Joe Biden was the one who signed it, and because I think Biden is intending to kick the ball to Trump, but essentially that handed a victory to Trump. It's a very easy victory. Trump just comes in and says, TikTok is back. By the way, TikTok is not really back because Trump can't really reverse a law passed by U.S. Congress.
Yeah, he can only ignore it.
What Trump did is give it 75 days extension for the implementation, which says TikTok either needs to be sold or be banned from US. And this is why Apple and Google are still abiding by the ban by they removed TikTok from their app store. If you have a new phone, I'm sorry, you can't download TikTok right now in USA because Apple and Google are still following the ban. So, but Trump he's the maverick, right? I mean, I do believe he could potentially make a deal with China. And we're going to just have to see how it's going to play out.
Mm-hmm. No, that's a good point. Yeah, I agree with you about Joe Biden, man. Joe Biden has been a horrible president. I mean, he's bringing us to the brink of war in multiple instances. I mean, even with China, like Joe Biden saying in one sense, we agree and accept the one China policy. And then in another sense, we will go to war to protect Taiwan. It's like, what? What? You are really saying that you're going to go to war with China? Okay, fair enough. And it's going to be over Taiwan, an area to which you say you accept is part of China? Like, it was one of the weirdest, strangest, weakest presidencies that we have ever had. And I agree with you. The ceasefire deal, that we'll see how long it lasts, but it's clear that even before Donald Trump was president, he was putting pressure to get that deal done, a deal that Netanyahu did not want to accept, avoided accepting for 6-7 months, and then was kind of brought to the table to accept almost overnight. Now, the real question is whether or not Donald Trump is going to put pressure on Israel to keep it, considering what is taking place in Lebanon, and considering that up to this point, the U.S. has accepted any and everything that Israel has effectively said. So, but I agree with you, though, the fact that Trump, with the slightest bit of pressure before even getting into office, was able to get it. And to your point, willing to have a conversation with Xi Jinping, willing to have a conversation with Kim Jong-un, willing to have a conversation with Putin, all of these things right off the bat, something that Biden couldn't or wouldn't even consider doing. So no, I agree with you. The phone call with Xi Jinping, is there a readout of what that was about?
Well, so far, I only saw a tweet from Trump himself. He said, I just spoke with Chairman Xi. The call was very good for both US and China. And it's my expectation that we will solve many problems together, starting immediately. We discussed balancing trade, fentanyl, TikTok, and many other subjects. President Xi and I will do everything possible to make the world more peaceful and safe. So it's actually a very hopeful message of peace, of talking about solving problem rather than placing blames. So this, I mean, before, one of the big talking point about from Republican side talking about China is I don't think it's even Republicans. I think it's from both aisle actually. Talking about China is how China caused the fentanyl crisis in United States instead of pointing the finger at the big pharma who started the opioid crisis in the U.S., who have been convicted in the court of law, the Sackler family. But these guys also own the media, so you can't really talk about that. And so much easier to blame China, who makes the legitimate pharmaceutical ingredients that was just being diverted by the gangs in U.S. and Mexico to make fentanyl. And one area China and U.S. can work on is the law enforcement used to have a trace program where they will trace the shipment of chemical precursors when they leave Chinese factory to make sure they don't end up in the wrong hands in North America. Like I fully expect they will try to restore that working relationship, which has been completely wrecked by the false accusation of Chinese like secret police department in U.S. and so that's what brought end to the law enforcement cooperation because like people will freak out with like Chinese police presence in North America. So I expect they will try to work on that relationship and the trade. Trump is always about trade. I expect to try to work out some deal because he has threatened tariffs and everything. But you know what? The easiest way to balance trade is just lift all the high tech, all the chip bans. China want to buy chips from United States. Biden administration said no. Even on the last day of Biden administration, they push out even more drastic chip restriction to restrict export of NVIDIA's AI chips to the world. It divided the world into 3 tiers. Like China and Russia is like the bottom tier, and then you have all these countries in Europe like Portugal, Poland, and Austria. Somehow they became tier 1. Somehow they're also on the restricted list. I don't know what Portugal did, or Poland, or Austria, but they're only 11 countries in Europe were on the trusted list. So I mean, that's foolish. I think for Trump, if you really care about trade deficit, just allow American companies like NVIDIA to export AI chips to China. China used to spend like $450 billion on chip imports, more than they spend on oil, because China spent about 350 billion importing oil. So that's a huge chunk of money that could help toward the balancing of trade if Trump really cared about that.
Wow, that's a lot of money. Xi Jinping apparently had a conversation with Putin, a video call. Apparently it was long. I would imagine detailed. Both leaders seem to really get along and like each other. So good on that. What was that conversation about? I saw the readout on the Russian side, but give me your take in regards to what that conversation was about, what they were discussing. Give me your thoughts.
Well, they first of all, they reaffirmed their strategic partnership. Xi Jinping brought up the fact that in 2024 alone, these two have met 3 times. None of them met with Biden, but they have saw each other 3 times. And Xi Jinping invited Putin to come to China for the 80th anniversary of victory over Japan in World War II. And Putin likewise invited Xi Jinping for the May Day victory parade in Moscow, celebrating the victory over Nazi Germany in the Great Patriotic War. So both sides reaffirmed their bonds forged during the World War II fighting fascism, and both sides are committed to continue to deepen the relationship. Putin mentioned that Russia is now the top oil exporter to China, number one provider of natural gas, and Russia and China are naturally complementary economies. Xi Jinping also said something very important. He said, "We will continue to resist external pressures on maintaining our stable strategic partnership." I mean, external pressure, everyone knows that's from the U.S. and the NATO, and we're going to have to see what Trump can offer either one of them, because one of the Trump some of the people that surrounding Trump have been talking about this for a long time. What they want to do is they want to pry Russia away from China's embrace. They wanted to get Russia on U.S. side, winding down the Ukraine war, so U.S. can concentrate on containing China and maybe even get Russia's help. I don't think that will pan out, and I think that the fact that you remember Donald Trump said that within 24 hours he will make a call to Putin and Zelensky and end the Ukraine conflict. Well, guess what?
24 hours.
Yeah. Guess what? Within the 24 hours of Trump presidency, it was Xi Jinping and Putin that made the call, and then they made the deal. They made a deal to reaffirm their relationship, their strategic partnership, and they reaffirmed. It's also very important. Xi Jinping mentioned this year is the 80th anniversary of UN, and and Putin suggests that China and Russia play a strategic important role to reaffirm to shape a more just multilateral world. And so they're talking about Russia and China working together to shape multipolarity, and this contrast was what Trump wants to do, because Trump right now, he already signed an executive order to pull out the WHO, pull out the Paris climate agreement. So United States is backing off on all the voluntarily to pull out all this multilateral institutions that United States itself helped to build. And whereas China and Russia is like, you know what? We will step up. We will step up and shape the new multipolar world order.
It is so wild to me. I mean, we helped create many of these systems that we're now effectively pulling out of. Why do you think that the U.S. has taken this kind of... I had a conversation with someone yesterday about this kind of the way the world seems to be, let's say, reshaping itself, where there seems to be this kind of skepticism towards international cooperation, this kind of re-entrenchment, Trump saying, well, yeah, we need to take Greenland and Canada, and Panama Canal. And keep in mind, the reason he's saying this, I think, and I want to get your take on it, is because he's looking at the world and he sees the U.S. as being more vulnerable than it has been in the past. I mean, in a weird case, you can almost see Joe Biden thinking in similar terms, right? But the way Joe Biden went about it was effectively using Europe as vassal states in order to antagonize all of these countries, whether Russia, China, or, whatever. Whereas Trump looks at it as, well, we need spheres of influence. And so our sphere of influence is Northern America. And if we can get our hands on Greenland and Panama Canal and Canada, we will be a match for, let's say, the relationships that are creating around the world against the U.S. Missing the fact that the reason those relationships were forming was because of the U.S. behavior to the rest of the countries around the world. I mean, when you're setting fires all across the planet, you can imagine that countries are going to say, hey, we need to stop these fires, and we need to deal with the country that's creating the fires. How do you see this? I mean, why do you think that there's this kind of re-entrenchment, this re-evaluation of the U.S.'s role in the world led by one Donald Trump?
Well, United States always made an exception for itself when it comes to international law. ICC, that was supposed to be for the colored folks. ICC is supposed to be for the people in the jungle, arresting all these African dictators, not the nice people in the jungle, in the garden of Europe and North America. And U.S. actually have a law that if ICC tried to enforce law against any U.S. politicians, they will invade Hague. This is, I'm not making this up. People can
No,
look
it's
it
called
up.
Attack the Hague. Yeah, it was under George
Yes.
Bush. Yeah.
U.S. will invade Hague if ICC ever try to force its law on U.S. officials. So U.S. always take it, but what Biden has done, a lot of people in the Biden administration still believe in like the full spectrum dominance. They try to do that by building alliances. Biden, Lincoln, whenever they give a public speech, they always talk about the importance of partnership and alliances. Of course, we don't know. We know U.S. don't treat them as partners; they're vassal states. But at least they maintain the facade. They are trying to put a tight leash on their vassals all around the world. But what Trump is a different approach. Trump administration, they saw that U.S. can no longer maintain a full spectrum dominance all over the globe. This is why there's a retrenchment back to Western Hemisphere. This is why Greenland and Canada could be important, because Arctic ice is melting. And that's favorable to Russia, actually, and China, because now that opens up the Northern Passage. China now can ship going through passing through Bering Strait, going through Arctic, travel to Europe at a much shorter distance and time than they would go through. Well, they can't. There's a bit of a problem in the Red Sea right now, and all Houthi managed to divert like 15% of world marine traffic all the way to around Africa. So it saves even more time to go through the Arctic route from China to Europe right now, and U.S. sees that, and U.S. wants to be part of the action. You can't have Russia has all the fun. Climate change actually favors Russia, so this is why they want Greenland. They want Canada. They want this old new frontier that just opened up, because Greenland is also very strategic. You already have U.S. bases, by the way. U.S. have a so-called space base in Greenland, but it's more like a U.S. military base. It actually monitors missile launches and stuff. That's what it's designed for. So if U.S. really want to take Greenland by force, there's nothing Denmark can do. There's nothing Denmark can do about it. What's Denmark going to do? Are they going to call NATO for help? I mean, U.S. is NATO, so there's nobody going to come to their rescue. This is something within U.S. grasp. Unlike Ukraine, that's like imperial overreach, or even Taiwan. This is something U.S. can very easily grab. Greenland and even Canada. I mean, like, what?
It's like, what are they going to do, right?
Yeah, what are they going to do? What are they going to do? So this is what they're trying. They're reaching for the low hanging fruit right now. They're trying to just consolidate the U.S. hegemony in the West Hemisphere. The reinforced Monroe Doctrine, if you will.
I'm curious, how do you think Xi Jinping is going to deal with this? I've asked, when I've had guests on China, I think I've asked this question before because I'm super curious about the answer. China tends to go with this idea of win-win relationships. This idea that, we're going to look at the world, we're going to create partners, we're going to create situations where people, let's say, get something out of any deal that we make with them, with the idea of creating a sustainable relationship. And it's not that I don't believe that a country of that size and that magnitude can't, let's say, have their own point of view and will be willing to push that point of view in a negotiation. But it does seem like they're willing to have win-win relationships. It is like, how do you deal with a country that is zero sum, that doesn't believe in these win-win relationships, that for all intents and purposes looks at the world as either vassals or enemies? And maybe Donald Trump is more open to negotiations, but Donald Trump still has that mindset. You can hear it in his voice when he talks. I mean, he considers himself a strong man in the way that he looks at himself. How does China, Xi Jinping specifically, deal and relate with a country like that?
We're going to see how, we're going to see this play out right now, how the TikTok saga is going to play out, because Trump said he proposed a 50-50 joint venture with TikTok, where United States owns 50%. But I don't know what he means by United States. Does he mean American companies or American investors? Because right now, the institutional investor from the West already own like 60% of ByteDance, the parent company of TikTok. I mean, like, so they already own more than 50%. But does he mean like the government of the United States is going to take a 50% stake on TikTok? That is the interesting proposal. You're talking about state. This is like state capitalism now.
Yes.
U.S. So we're gonna have to see what kind of deal Donald Trump is proposing. But China is there. They don't put their one egg. They don't put all their eggs in one basket. You know, Trump talking about taking over Panama because, oh no, the Chinese are taking over Panama, which is completely ridiculous. The whole talks about China taking over Panama is because since 1998, a Hong Kong-based company, Hutchinson Wanghua, and later consolidated into CK Hutchinson, which is owned by Hong Kong billionaire Li Ka-shing, has taken over one of the port to run one of the port in Panama. Now they operate 3 ports, and the United States always been freaked out about this. Oh, Chinese influence. But even if U.S. take over Panama, you know, China already built a megaport in Shanghai in Peru. Right. South American goods no longer have to go through Panama Canal. They can just get redirected to Shanghai port. And China is building another megaport in Mexico. So like that. So now like all the Latin American trade with China will be less dependent on Panama Canal. You know, when you have these megaports in Peru, in South America, and another megaports in Mexico. So it makes U.S. controlling Panama Canal less of a choking point, less of relevancy. This is China's strategy. We're gonna build out so many infrastructure, so many ports, so many connectivity that U.S. Navy can isolate into one single choke point and chokehold. And this is what the U.S. calls China's string of pearls strategy. They're just casting pearls everywhere, and U.S. Navy does not have the capacity to be at everywhere all at once. So this is. So I mean, China is not. China is playing the long game, and I believe that they might even. I mean. I don't know. There might even be a possibility they will let TikTok be like a joint venture with Trump. Who knows? Anything is possible. So I'm waiting to see how that saga will wind. By the way,
I don't think I mean, just going for the okay. I'll organize my thoughts. The string of pearls strategy, yes, where they're basically building ports, and I guess that kind of gets to my point, right? It's not like they're going to those countries and building military bases. They're actually building stuff that's to the benefit of the country itself. And so the countries are more inclined to want to work with China because they're doing things to the benefit of the country itself. That port is not just going to take Chinese products. That port is going to take all sorts of products from anywhere they want to use that port. And all of those things are going to be in the best interest of the country itself that utilizes them. So yeah, I would imagine that many of those countries are okay and on board with China for doing so. The Panama Canal thing was always weird to me, and I didn't quite get it. China doesn't own the Panama Canal, correct?
Yeah, I mean, can I just say it? These mofos in Washington, they're racist because they find out a Hong Kong billionaire Li Ka-shing has this company that runs this port in Panama Canal. Oh my God, Chinese influence, CCP is controlling Panama Canal. I mean, there's no indication that Li Ka-shing is even like Beijing's man. He was, because Beijing didn't really completely trust him because he took an ambiguous stance during the 2019 Hong Kong protests. So Li Ka-shing actually moved his headquarters outside of Hong Kong. Li Ka-shing is now like based outside of Hong Kong. But I think this is it's just as simple as that, just racism. The people like, oh my God, this is a Hong Kong guy is taking over, is taking over Panama Canal. It's a Chinese influence.
Yeah, it's weird. It's very strange. I mean, when you're in a country like this, it's always shocking at how little, I guess, they know or care about the rest of the world. And when they're looking at China, they're looking at China as this kind of huge geopolitical enemy when it doesn't really need to be that way. Why do you think they consider China an enemy in general?
Well, there are multiple reasons. I mean, one is because China is non-Western and non-white. Kieran
Mhm.
Skinner, the former national security advisor to the first Trump administration, said that. She said that aloud. She said because unlike Soviet Union, which still, Russia is still part of the Western culture, China is from like an alien civilization, and they're not Caucasian. It's a first like big Caucasian power the United States have to contend with, and another reason, Jake Solomon talked about this. Jake Solomon gave an interview to China Project podcast, but this podcast had been scrubbed off the internet for some reason. So during the podcast, he said, "Well, actually, he admit China is actually not an existential threat to the United States, but he said China is very useful concept to unite various factions, United States, into to galvanize everyone into a national project." I mean, Matt Ignacia openly talk about this on X, on Twitter. He said China is what could unite the left and the right in the United States into reindustrializing America. Bring the jobs back, reindustrial, because we know what the problem with U.S. is. The problem is the freaking Wall Street types. They have been hollowing up the industry. They always chase the highest margin, so they outsource all the manufacturing capacity in East Asia since 1970s.
Yep.
And we're seeing the result, the increasingly financialization of the U.S. economy, and the increasing dependence on, say, manufactured goods from China. China didn't come to United States to point gun to all these high executives as they move your factory to China. No. They moved willingly, chasing profits. And now there's a real problem in the United States where the middle class is atrophied as a result of all this offshoring for 40 years. And people are angry. And guess what? But you can't blame the Wall Street, all the fat cats who actually did this to them, because these guys also owns our media. They owns our corporate media. So the easiest scapegoat is number one, immigrants, number two, China. And so blame immigrants, blame China is an easy political game for these politicians trying to win votes. So there's that, and then there are people who are worried about China surpassing United States as the number one power in the world, and they wanted to do things in U.S. like expand government control. How do you justify that? National security. Like the whole. I mean, look at the whole TikTok thing. A lot of the TikTokers actually understand this perfectly. This is not about China, because all your data is already in the United States. Like a lot of Canadians found out during the TikTok outage that they were also offline on TikTok, because let's face it, their data was not storing on servers in Canada. Their data was all stored in US servers. And that impacted even some users in Thailand, because all these people's data was actually stored in the United States. So this is not about data. This is about control. This is about narrative control, because TikTok is one of those few platforms that was less stringent on censorship when it comes to sensitive issues like Palestine. Well, until recently, I saw some people posting after the ban, now you can't say Free Palestine in TikTok anymore. So maybe maybe Trump made them bend the knee, but this was the reason for the ban in the first place, because there's organization like ADL, like the ADL president openly said we have to capture TikTok because TikTok is like Al Jazeera on drugs. It's radicalizing our youth against Israel. This is a battle that Israel must win. And so you have organization like ADL and Apex, spending a lot of money, want to shut down TikTok. You have all the tech overlords like Zuckerberg want to shut down their rivals, and then you have all these national security weirdos, who have always have a hard boner for China, want to shut down anything Chinese. So it's a combination of these things working together, and I think that also kind of explains the xenophobia in United States. It's because now a lot of the American businesses, especially in the tech community, they see China as a serious competitor, like Mark Zuckerberg, for example, right? I mean, because he has no face. He used to like scrape and bow to Xi Jinping, ask Xi Jinping to let him into the Chinese market. I asked Xi Jinping to name his son, but he got suddenly rejected. Right. So now he turned like 180. He wants to get rid of TikTok. He wants to be go hard on China. And but it's all about money. When it comes down to it, it's all about money. All these the tech our tech overlords in Silicon Valley, both Google and Facebook, they're not in China, so they don't lose anything, but they have everything to gain by shutting down their rival like TikTok. And then you have Elon Musk. He doesn't want Chinese EV to come to the United States. He said that very clearly. If it's not for tariffs, the Chinese EV would destroy the American car industry. And so there's a combination of big business, national security elite, and of course you have those ADL and Apex freaks because they want to control the narrative. This is like a really combination of all these uniquely American elements coming together to make China the big scapegoat.
Well, it's wild, right? Because initially it used to be this thing of we believe in globalism, we believe we want this kind of global marketplace, we believe that this is the way the world should work. And then when it became clear, oh, wait, China can make a car for $5,000 that's better than a $30,000, $40,000 car in the US. Okay, well, globalism might have gone too far. Maybe we need to re-entrench. Maybe we need to pull back on the globalism stuff. I mean, it's pretty wild the way that switched up all of a sudden. I want to go back to this call between Xi Jinping and Putin, though. Was there any concrete objectives that they've laid out that they want to, let's say, switch, change, adjust now that Donald Trump is in office, as opposed to, let's say, a Joe Biden being in office?
Well, I think they largely, it's a reaffirmation of their current strategic partnership. They are just reassuring each other this bond will last, and I think it's important to do that. And as regardless what Donald Trump will offer on the table, because Russia and China relationship has its own dynamic outside of, say, the Russia-US relation and China-US relationship. By the sheer fact that Russia and China are neighbors, they share one of the world's longest border, right. and they also happen to have the complementary economy. China consumes a lot of commodities that Russia produces, and Russia consumes a lot of manufactured goods from China, especially after all the European American products pulled out as a result of the sanction. Even if they lift the sanction today, all these car manufacturers going to have a tough time in the Russian market just for the fact that the spot has been taken. The Chinese EVs already started to eat their lunch in places like Southeast Asia, Latin America. Chinese EV came from nothing to be like 1/3 of the new vehicles sold in Mexico. you
Mhm.
know, and so and this is like without sanction. And so I think even if they lift the sanction on Russia today, those Western car companies are not going to get their market back. They're not going to get
Yeah.
market. They lost it. Um, and especially when the Russian consumers start to familiarize themselves with Chinese consumer goods like cars and like what they had, what they saw, they're not going to go back. And this is why Japanese automakers are facing pressure. German automakers are facing pressure. The only Japanese automaker that's still doing okay now is Toyota. Mitsubishi, Honda, Nissan, they're all in trouble. That's why they're all talking about merger together into a super company. But when you have three troubled companies merging together, you're just gonna get a bigger troubled company. So I don't think that's gonna work out.
Right.
But
It's like,
this is
yeah.
also the kind of the challenge that a lot of the Western multinationals sees in China, because they see China, once they move into one field, they cannot compete. Like you said, during the peak globalization era, that's the same corresponded with the U.S. hyperpower. Globalization is good because then we're going to sell you McDonald's, Coca-Cola, and Levi jeans. But now they realize, wait a minute, China is doing much better than us at this globalization game. Okay, maybe globalization was a bad idea. So, it was just follow the money. Everything, if you follow the money, a lot of things just start to make sense.
No, I agree with you, man. Is China concerned about sanctions? I mean, Donald Trump has apparently jumped on this notion of tariffs. Tariffs is the answer to everything. That is going to be the way that America retrenches, that it gets its power back, it gets its groove back in the world. Is China overly concerned about this? Or for the most part, sanctions have been so, have proliferated to such a degree that they've just accustomed to them, like they've already accommodated the sanctions. I mean, I guess I'm looking at this and looking at the Biden administration, who was passing all of these tariffs against Chinese products, and Donald Trump is effectively going in and threatening to do the same thing. What kind of deal can China and Russia make? I guess China and the U.S. What kind of deal can these two countries make?
First of all, regardless what United States do, the Chinese are very practical people. They have survived under a couple thousand years of like centralized bureaucracy. They know how to get around a regulation and bureaucracy. They know how to get around sanctions. They are already, a lot of the Chinese factories are moving into Southeast Asia, for example. They moved to Vietnam, Indonesia, Cambodia to get around the sanctions. That trend was started before the sanction, but it accelerated during the sanction, and they go to Mexico. BYD open factories in Mexico, and because Mexico was part of the NAFTA agreement. So remember, this is why Trump is not just threatening to slap sanctions against China. He also wants to slap 25% tariff on Mexico and Canada. Those are the two biggest trading partner of the United States, okay?
Mm-hmm.
The top trading partner of the United States is Canada, Mexico, and China. So Trump wants to slap tariff on all of them. I mean, if that really goes through, this is going to cause major economic upheaval inside the United States. But I'm thinking this might just be his hardball negotiation tactic, when you haggle, you first raise your price higher until give you haggle room. And so China is preparing in any case for this tariff increase, but I think they are also holding out to make a deal with Trump. We're gonna have to see what Trump has to offer.
Well, that's a good point. I guess it's like, what kind of deal can they make? Is there any chance that the U.S. pulls China away from Russia? That used to be the plan. And somewhere along the way, Joe Biden couldn't remember the fact that was the plan, and got more belligerent. Is there any chance, any degree of possibility of the U.S., it's like, come with us. You're better off with us. Is there any, because what's weird about the United States is the Republicans seems to be less hawkish towards Russia, meaning they seem to care less about Russia. In fact, I would wager that at 3 a.m. between them and their God, some of them even like Putin. They hate China, or at the very least, the Republicans. It's a very weird dynamic where they can't decide which country they need to hate the most. Trump seems to target Xi Jinping more than he targets Putin, and I'm not quite sure why. Maybe it's because
it's
China is
not
a
it's
large.
not
No,
it's not that complicated, Jamar. Russia, by many conservatives, is seen this white Christian nation, right?
Oh, I see.
Whereas China is communist, it's atheist, it's not white. It's not white. And so I mean that's really the crux of it. And but the thinking that somehow United States can just snap a finger and suddenly turn Russia against China, that's wishful thinking.
Nonsense.
Because
Yeah.
like I said, Russia-China relationship has its own dynamic outside of the relationship with the United States. And it makes sense for the two to become friendly and good neighborly relations. And they're not competing. Russia and China, they're not competing. They work together. You know, like a lot of time people say, oh, China and Russia, they're going to compete for influence in Central Asia. That's not what happened, because China is not interested in projecting hard power. They are interested in doing business. So whereas in Central Asia, China is pouring a lot of economic investment, it's Russia that's still
Mhm.
providing security. And so this is a very complementary setup. This is how they used to work in Syria, you know, before that whole Syria thing fiasco. You know, Russia provided the hard power, the muscle. China
Right.
provided economic aid. This is how they work together. They're complementary. And US, what does US have to bring? I mean, they have to. I think what the conservatives do want to do is they do want to wind down the Ukraine war, so that more resource can be redirected into confront China.
Yeah.
That might still happen. You know, we're gonna have to see, but I don't even see what can they offer Russia on the table in terms of Ukraine, because Russia is winning the battlefield. Russia is gonna carry out their operations until Russia is satisfied. And so this is not a negotiation from like kind of equal opposite but equal side. This is they're gonna acquiesce to all the Russian demands, or Russia is gonna get them regardless. And then, you know, what's West bringing to the table? I mean, one thing they could bring is maybe lifting of the sanctions.
Mhm.
And again, lifting of sanctions is good. It's, you know, even China could benefit from that, because one of the things that China wanted to do is build the Eurasian land bridge to Europe through Russia. So Russia is a very important link, and so China actually also want to see the conflict wind down in Ukraine, because that kind of put a damper on this whole Eurasian land bridge project when Russia has been sanctioned. And so I'm actually hopeful to see a solution to the Ukrainian conflict now that Trump is in power. But you know, the issue is going to be resolved on Russia's turn.
Yeah.
That's what I think is going to happen.
Is there any changes that China is making with Trump is in office? And maybe I've asked this before, but I'm trying to ask it in a slightly different direction. I would imagine China has these long-term objectives. When they're looking out at the world, they say, okay, this is what we want to do. This is our objective. This is the direction that we're going. Is that affected by the US president that's in office at any particular moment? Or are the long-term goals immutable?
I mean, China's focus is always mostly internal. China is trying to develop China, trying to provide better, more prosperous life for its citizens. That's always China's primary goal. And what U.S. do often is plays a spoiler role, kind of put a damper on it, like what first Trump, but later Joe Biden tried to do. And they haven't been able to do that very effectively. And for it's not what China would do different, because from Xi Jinping's perspective, China always hold out the olive branch. Like Xi Jinping repeatedly said, the Pacific is large enough, the world is large enough for both U.S. and China. We don't have to be enemies. We can be friends.
Right.
We can be partners. Let's help. Let's work hand in hand to resolve the issue of this world. So this Xi Jinping's offer is always on the table. It's actually up to United States to adopt a different stance, a different approach to China. And it's up to Trump whether he wants to go down that route or choose a more confrontational approach. From China's point of view, China always would prefer to work with a more cooperative United States without all these hostility. But if that's the case, then we'll try to work around. If U.S. decide to maintain the hostile stance, China will work around it. But they will prefer a more friendly relationship. So it's really up to the U.S. government to change their own approach. China's approach is the same. They're always open for more cooperative relationship.
Yeah. Can we go to North Korea for a moment? So Trump being in office, I get the sense that he wants to go back to this kind of deal making with North Korea. And from my point of view, great. I hate the fact that North Korea is effectively firing missiles into the Sea of Japan because the U.S. is basically being belligerent towards North Korea. From your take, though, and maybe not North Korea, let's go to South Korea. That's a better angle. The president of South Korea, from my understanding, had been held up with preventing federal investigators from getting their hands on the president of South Korea. Is he in custody yet? I got to be honest. I've been a little bit busy over the last few days.
He was arrested.
Okay, that's arrested.
So he held out for for a long time. He held up for more than 11 days, and there's completely lack of coverage in the Western media when a president of a country, even though he was impeached, is being held up in his bunker, and his presidential security services refused to let the police to come in, and so the South Korean the Office for Investigation of Corruption in Higher Offices, they had to mobilize 1,000 police to finally rush the compound, and then the President Yoon finally gave in. He said, "Oh, I'm not doing this as an admission of guilt. I'm doing this because I want to avoid bloodshed. I want to and it's really weird situation because his presidential security services, these people are supposed to be loyal to the South Korean state.
Exactly.
Not to not personally loyal to one person who is in the office of president. And besides, his presidential power was already suspended by the parliament, and so this is actually a serious challenge to the South Korean political system, because they already shown their special forces and their presidential security services. These people may be they're not really being controlled by the state. They're not really answerable to the state, to the South Korean state. And so there, but he is arrested now, and I expect the legal proceeding will commence. I'm pretty sure President Yoon will try to drag this out as long as possible, because, like I said, he's a lawyer. He had participated in the previous 2 impeachment of previous South Korean president, so he knows every single legal details and legal proceeding. He will try to drag this out as long as possible. So I think his hope is for the public opinion to shift, right? Because immediately after the coup, the overwhelmingly public is against him. So he's just right now trying to drag this out. So maybe what happened during the coup will fade from the public memory.
Yeah.
and also allow him to remain the president, because as long as the Supreme Court of South Korea do not confirm the impeachment, his duty as president is suspended, but he's still the president. So this is kind of the game that he's playing right now.
What? So he's in custody, but he's still president as he's in custody.
Yeah.
That's
They have
astonishing.
to the Supreme Court have to confirm the impeachment to remove him from the office, and the Supreme Court, there's that issue with staffing because there's 9 judges, supposed to be 9 judges, but three seats are vacant, and so they, according to the Constitution, they need 6 out of 9 judges all agree to remove him. But right now there are only 6 judges. So if they're going to proceed, then all 6 judges have to agree unanimously. But among the 6 judges, there are some of Yoon's appointees. So this is a problem, and this is why Yoon's party was resisting appointment of new judges to those 3 empty seats. Because they don't want a 9-judge trial. They just want like a 6-judge trial. So this is a legal drama now. This is going to continue to play in South Korean court.
Carl, this is insane. So the president is in custody, but South Korea can't get a new president because the previous president, they can't have the Supreme Court can't necessarily make a ruling on him because they don't have enough judges to make a ruling. Oh God, man, this is so weird. So where are they going to get the additional justices from if the president can't appoint them because the president is sitting in a jail cell?
Well, they have acting president, right? This is why the parliament was trying to pressure the acting president to fill those vacancies as soon as possible. But when the acting president refused to cooperate, that's why they impeached the acting president. That's why 2 acting presidents got impeached in a row because they refused to cooperate with the parliament to fill the vacancy of the Supreme Court. I mean, this is just a big court drama, big political process. This is gonna be a drawn out affair. We're gonna have to see how
a clown car. I mean, this is like a clown car of just nonsense. All right, so is the acting president allowing for the? I mean, this is so weird. 2 presidents, so it's not even acting. It's the acting president. So is he allowing Supreme Court nominees?
The parliament is not going to give this up easily. If I haven't followed the latest because there's other stuff going on, but if the new acting president is not allowing the seats to be filled, then he will be impeached too by the parliament. Because the opposition right now, they have the majority in the parliament. They're not gonna suddenly gave up on this momentum. They want to make sure that those seats should fill so they can have a 9-judge panel to judge the president's case.
Just amazing. So there can be no presidential elections until the previous president is removed.
Yes,
is that correct?
Yes, that's the problem. This is why they're trying to drag out this battle, because by South Korean law, if the president is removed, then they need to have a snap election. But President Yoon is dragging this out because he knows if they hold the election today, his party is going to lose. So his party is going to trying to drag this out as long as possible until this faith from the people forget about the coup. This is their strategy.
Outrageous, Carl. Outrageous. Carl, man, thank you for this rundown. I deeply appreciate it. I always appreciate talking to you. I always enjoy these conversations. And I think the audience loves the fact that you can explain this stuff in a way with good temperament, despite the fact that some of the stuff is just outrageous. I cannot believe what is happening in South Korea right now. I have never seen anything like that. Like the notion that one president tries to overthrow the government, then hides behind a security detail. Then they can't get a new president because that president is dragging it out. And you can't even impeach that president because you only have 6 out of 9 members of the Supreme Court. And then to make it even worse, you can't even get new members of the Supreme Court because each acting president refuses to do it. And so they get impeached. And so you get up with two impeachments. Just astonishing stuff. Just completely astonishing stuff. KJ, man, thank you for this. I'm sorry, Carl Ja, I should say. Thank you for this.
KJ
Carl,
is a good guy. I don't mind.
yeah, KJ is awesome. He's cool people too. But we're not talking to him. We're talking to Carl Ja. Carl Ja, he is host of Silk and Steel podcast focused on China and surrounding regions. Yes, surrounding regions and their history, culture, and politics. You can follow Carl on Twitter at Carl Ja. You can follow his podcast on Twitter at Steel Silk In. And you can subscribe and support their podcast on patreon.com/silk and steel. Carl, man, thank you for this. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jamar. Always a pleasure to talk to you.
Always enjoy these conversations, man. Thank you. Be safe. All right. I need to call this a bit early today. Tomorrow, I'm going to have Ritter on. I have another gentleman named Richard Solomon, and we're going to have somebody at 8 o'clock, probably Malik, because I think he's probably going to have a lot to say about the inauguration. But we will see. I have several appointments that I really need to get to this morning because the rental situation is going to change pretty quickly. And I'm going to have to find somewhere to live going on the beginning of next month. But I'm probably going to have shows over the course of today. Hopefully, I can get interviews lined up over the course of today. And so hopefully I will see you guys later today. So I'm going to end this a bit early this morning. I'm going to say like it, share it, subscribe to it. Again, I'm hoping to see you later on today before the day ends. But you all have a fantastic day if I don't. And I will see you bright and early in the morning. I am going to say Jamal Thomas Morning Show. Signing off. See you guys in a few. Thanks all.